guys look a lot better than the silhouette cutouts.
Says who?
Me, man.
Frank, I'm still not over it, man. You look like well rested, like all groomed.
I didn't do a red eye. I was home in my my home by 7:30 or 8 o'clock last night.
You had the slippers on, man, and the feet up.
So
I was walking the dog,
all...
covering for my being gone for a week. So
yeah, it was a week.
Yeah.
So we all almost died in the desert, right?
Yeah.
100-degree heat, dust storms. When I was landing, it looked like Mad Max.
That was nasty.
Yeah. And then we got in, and this was my first year at ChannelCon, so that CompTIA community is really amazing. We've been participating for a few months, but it was great. It was great getting to meet the whole community there. What about you guys? Have you guys been out there before for ChannelCon?
I've been dozens of years, but not about dozens of years, but I've been going for a long time. Between ChannelCon, used to be called Breakaway. It's a unique event in a number of ways. I mean, there's expo, there's keynotes, but it's the in-between stuff, which is peer-to-peer and, colleague to colleague, and a mixture of discussions, all, pretty much vendor agnostic. So there's no bias, there's no, selling, per se, at the event. And it's community, right? I mean, it's just people, competitors talking to competitors, partners talking to vendors, to analysts, to, print. I mean, it's really just a really comfortable combination of community. We also a lot of C's, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I agree. So, it was my first time too.
Cool. Your first time?
Yeah,
Mike,
my first time.
What about you?
First time. I would say.
Wow.
Sorry about
Someone's
that.
upset.
Whoa.
He said he's been out there before.
Yeah, Frank's dog missed out on the action, I guess. I was gonna say unusually lively party for a bunch of IT people.
No kidding.
It was bumping.
Yeah.
With pyrotechnics that were certainly unnecessary given how hot it was that night.
It was so hot.
The DJ coupled it with a song about the roof being on fire too, which I thought
Sean and I were like 2 inches away from the pyrotechnics when they first went off.
Hey, Mike, I'd like to thank you for posting that picture of me. I don't quite look like Shrek, but I look like a demon. My mouth is wide open, my eyes are closed and dark. It's a scary looking picture, man. It's not cool.
So, all right, intros, guys. Mike, why don't we go in picture order? You're at the top left here, buddy.
Appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Mike Bakaich from Iceberg Cyber. We're a Canadian cybersecurity startup trying to push the envelope with the cyber version of a credit score for small businesses. And this came up a lot when we were talking with especially the newer, smaller MSPs, trying to give them a practical way to talk about cybersecurity with their small business clients.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Mike.
And Mike, you're founder? What's your title?
That's right.
Give us your title. Okay.
Founder of Iceberg Cyber. We are approaching our 1-year anniversary in a month or so.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Well, I shuffled the deck here, and now Frank's next.
Well, I've quieted the dog down, so we're good. It's the Frank Ramondi, so VP Channel Alliances and partnerships for IGI Cyber Labs, which is the producer of Nodeware, which following up on Mike's point there with the scoring, we do vulnerability management scoring for every asset on a network, from cameras to servers and everything in between. So we've been around quite a while, a good number of years, but kind of relaunching the product through channels, and excited to be with all you guys and working with FortMesa and other vendors to get the awareness down to the small business level of one, identification of assets, knowing what you got in your network, and then 2, how dangerous they can be, and sort of that re-educating the mindsets on what is a risk, and that there are risks even in the small business. So really driving a lot of that activities.
Great. Well, thanks for being here with us, Frank.
Yeah.
We're happy to see you.
Thanks.
Looks like I'm up. I'm Zach Keeney. I'm Director of Channel Sales with FortMesa. I bring our people process side of technology to the table, having owned a franchise operation prior to my time with FortMesa that contracted and worked directly with MSPs. Happy to be here. I'm really happy that we could have you guys on as guests. So thanks for being here, guys.
Cool.
Looks like I'm slow on the window swapping here. Sean, you're up.
And there I am, bigger than life, right? My name is Sean Robertson. I'm founder and president of Strategic Technology Associates. We're a 12-person MSP, also in Canada on the East Coast, a little bit away from Mike, but close enough that we can still be compadres for sure.
Close to Frank over there.
Yeah, yes, not far.
Well, I'm in Portland, Oregon, not Portland, Maine.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a long ways away.
Yeah, we got a long way to get over here.
That's right. It wasn't only a 2-hour flight. Right?
I need that map again.
Canada's north of the U.S.
Oh,
yes,
my
right.
God.
Yes.
Since when?
It's all north, right?
So, Matt Fisch, founder, CEO of FortMesa, your host today. I got into this business to help this community, so it was a really interesting reminder this week out at ChannelCon. I love meeting all my customers and my opportunities in person. Getting a chance to have that personal angle is neat. And look at this thing. I was awarded this week, guys.
Okay.
It was a plaque. They came
Wow.
and handed it to me and did like a handshake photo thing. That felt great.
I
Congratulations.
feel like you should get a rubber stamp, so you can start stamping documents with that.
Mike, you just gave me a great Christmas idea, so thank you.
This was the one impression I get. Now it goes in a closet until
I'm thinking wax seal is the way to go, guys.
Wax
That's
seal,
the
yeah,
way.
like one of those rings that you put on.
There you go. The big ring, you push her down. There you go.
All right. Before we get into talking about, we want to cover ChannelCon today for our audience and talk about CompTIA and how that relates to the ChannelCon ecosystem. And we want to talk about the Trustmark. But before we do that, we're going to do the boring part that's super important. So
The old education.
Yeah, let's jump into education. So CIS Control 2, inventory and control of software assets. So there's some sub-controls here that get cover the technical practices that CIS distinguishes when they talk about, well, how do you do that software inventory control? You need to make a list of things. You need to study the list and see what's approved, what's not approved. If something's not approved, you have to remove it or do something about it. That's the process of software inventory management. And when I talk about approved, we mean approved for business use, right? Or approved within the business context, because every piece of software adds risk to the organization. So the organization should be bought into that. And there's a process you go through to manage that in pretty much any security standard. But in CIS, it's a few different specific steps. Before we go into any of the technical how-tos in any more depth, does anyone want to talk about a personal experience with software inventory control?
I have a stupid question if somebody doesn't want to give a personal experience.
Well, you're up.
Okay.
I think it's stupid question time. So there's software assets and then there's hardware assets. Why delineate the difference? And are there any that can be in a gray area?
Yeah, it does get complicated. So if you open up an InfoSec book, there's like a dozen or 20 different types of assets. At FortMesa, we boil these down, and CIS does the same thing. They boil them down just a few categories. And so in CIS, they look at devices. A device is something you can touch, like a physical thing, right? But it could also be something virtual, and that is where it gets a little confusing. So if you think about a virtual machine, right? It's software, like it's a ghost in the machine. It's all built out of software, but they consider that to be a device, and then the applications that are installed on that's not the operating system, right? That would be the software. Whatever's added to the operating system is the software. The other types of assets are things like data assets, or perhaps third-party business processes might be considered information assets, or even paper assets would be information assets.
Awesome.
Uh,
Could I throw one more question? Or it sounds like maybe Sean wants to put, or started to give an input. Or Frank, excuse me.
Well, mine was more of a question on it. Like, I'm wondering how firmware plays into this. Like, is it device or is it software?
Yeah. So, yes.
Yeah, of course.
So as an organization, you just need to decide and do the right thing. The reason why CIS splits software from device separately is because you need to have a process to manage these things. And the processes for things that you can touch and feel and lock away in a closet are a little bit different than things that are slippery installed inside those devices. And so I would say, a firmware could be part of a device, but it's also a piece of software on the device, right? And I'm not sure which is more appropriate, but I think as an organization, when we look at, if we go back to CIS here, right? It says actively manage, inventory, track, and correct. So you just need to decide how you're going to track it. And if we actually were looking at, the controls 2.1, 2.2, like the first one, 2.1 would be pretty basic in terms of deciding how you're going to inventory it, right? And they do make some suggestions, but the important thing is to have a methodology. Now, our software and perhaps Mike and Frank's software probably has an angle here in terms of enumerating the types of software. And all three of us are looking for vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why we want to track software lists. But tracking software lists and inventorying them and managing them and correcting them is a separate activity from vulnerability management.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say that I think there's another complicating, current state of the world, right, with SaaS applications, right? You're running them on a browser that's, it's running on a system, but it's, it's somebody else's software, somebody else's hosting. And, we've worked with kind of a 1-2 punch with SaaS alerts. I'm sorry, SaaS, not part of Avic, right? That does software SaaS management and identification and usage, and both authenticated and unauthenticated, because there's a risk just with the access points into that. So I don't know where that fits on the controls there. If that's considered the software, or is that just a third party app? I mean, because somebody else is hosting that, right? Somebody else is driving what that software is doing. There isn't a version issue or version control or anything there.
In our the way we think of this in Mesa, because we just had to think of some way to break down a really complicated problem and try to make it simple, is that when a third party is holding your data, like a SaaS company, that's both actually, because the third party has the data, but they're also providing software to your company, and you might have that listed twice, and it might be, believe it or not, there's SaaS out there that doesn't store data, right? There's also software out there that doesn't live in SaaS, right? But yeah, SaaS Leo is popular right now. Clearly, that's what they do, right? This third party SaaS inventory management. It's a great example, actually, of one of the reasons why you should be doing software inventory control. If you're an enterprise and you notice that your employees are using Google Drive and OneDrive and Box.com, you have to ask yourself, are those all company approved?
Yeah.
Is one of those a door where they're just stealing company secrets, or are they just dropping them on their home computer because that's easy, right?
Yeah.
So the inventory process allows you to discover those types of situations, and then on the local machines, clearly, if you're doing it in software inventory control, you're going to find 3 different PDF readers in some cases, right? From a company perspective, do you want 3 ways for people to break in, or do you want to just take care of one PDF reader?
Well, and go beyond the security questions there, right? I mean, it's even just a business licensing standpoint, right? If you've got 5 individuals with a box account or 5 with whatever, right? But you already have a corporate license, but they're paying $10 a month on their personal credit card and expensing it. I mean, you're just, so there's clearly the security issues, but there's also a business, interest there to save money or be more efficient.
Well, there's a significant productivity improvement as well by knowing what's supposed to go on a device when you deploy it. My whole function at my business is to keep people working. You start deploying machines that don't have this and don't have that, and someone got the wrong version of this, people stop working. So just keeping track of stuff adds so much value from a security perspective and from a business operations perspective.
Before we move on, I'd like to pose a question for Mike. When we were out there, you were telling me that you like to prioritize some of the newer MSPs, potentially lower maturity, that are maybe need more help in a number of these different spaces. When you're engaging with customers and you do vulnerability management primarily, which this falls into, do you ever see anything with your lower maturity customers from an education standpoint that you'd love to point out to other MSPs that might be helpful in learning in the space?
I'm glad that you picked this control to talk about, because this touches on the vein, which was my main takeaway from ChannelCon this year, is that we had a couple fun sessions, especially in cybersecurity, talking about like the big name incidences and a little bit of scare tactics with AI. But a lot about cybersecurity is like super boring, tedious work. And this is a great example, because this is just a checklist spreadsheet type activity in its most basic form, like creating a spreadsheet of all of your inventory and hardware assets, listing out model, vendor, firmware version, and keeping track on it in some sort of calendar activity. Mm-hmm. That is the tedious, boring layer of cybersecurity that gets you from 0 to 2 out of 10 on the scale. That's a lot of the conversations we have with our MSPs. Like, cybersecurity does not have to be complicated, does not have to be scary. In many ways, it's as simple as writing out a list and reminding yourself to do it for all of your clients every Friday afternoon. Now, there's great tools like what Frank and what we do that make it easier, but in its truest form, we're just running through spreadsheets. We got software so we can run through 1,000 spreadsheets at once, but we're just running through spreadsheets.
Well, and actually, interestingly, I had a call this morning with the MSP. They've got a couple different customers on, and they were kind of at that point where it's like, oh shoot, I just learned so much. Now I got to do something. Right? I learned where, whether they were a bunch of desktop or Windows systems that, we were finding a lot of vulnerabilities, and they're like, oh God, how do I got to do that? And it's like,
yeah,
kind of be careful what you ask for in a certain case.
Totally.
But ultimately, they're doing they need to be doing the right thing for the customer. This is what they're getting paid for, or you as an attendee here, right? It is a little bit more difficulty, it's a lot more difficult than a BDR or some other RMM basic tools that you're running, right? You're finding these things that you didn't know before, and your customer had no clue about before. But
Frank, I'm sure just like us, you and I get paid to create more work for our clients.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Someone told me that a couple weeks ago. I thought, oh yeah, that's a great way to put it, because that's what we're doing. Vulnerability. You can run a vulnerability assessment on anything. It's like going to the doctor or going to the car mechanic and saying, hey, can you check out my car? They're gonna find something.
Yeah.
Like, at least we're following some third-party SOPs, but we find stuff all the time.
Yep. What you do with it, and with your customer, that's up to you. But
right, much of it with contextual information doesn't need to be actioned on, and that's a lot of the education that we do is just walking MSPs through that decision-making process and saying, here are some prioritization routines. Let me say that simpler. Here are some checklists that you can use to rank and prioritize. This is what CISA says. This is what NIST says. This is what a CVSS score means. Mm-hmm. Relate that down to the dental clinic and compare that with how painful it will be to reboot this device or patch this device. and we help them build their own judgment process so that when new vulnerabilities pop up, they can work through it in a time efficient way.
Awesome.
Because it like we can't just leave them with a long laundry list and then say you have to fix all these. Okay, there's 100 vulnerabilities on this list. They don't get paid enough to fix them all, and they don't need to fix them all. They don't need to. They just need to understand what the risk is.
Really, it helps them prioritize, right, and finding the most common thing. Just kind of, we always tell them, just take the top 10 that you found and just work on those, and just kind of chunk away, because you're never going to because there's going to be another 10 that come up next week, right? Vulnerabilities are coming daily. Yeah,
absolutely.
All right, guys.
Firefox flamed us with a ton yesterday while we were at the event. Oh, to throw back to your point, Frank, about the SaaS applications, while we were at the event yesterday, CISA published like the top 12 CVEs from 2022, and Atlassian Confluence had one of the top 12.
Really?
Which is a SaaS platform. Yeah. It was like Exchange, some Apache stuff. Atlassian had 2 in the top 12.
Ooh.
Wow.
All right, before we move on, let me so we just did a rambling why-ish and what, but let's just do the quick how-to, okay? So, and the quick why. Why, we talked technically why, but there's another reason why. Every security standard says you have to do this. They all say it's not optional, and it's really important. And for a service provider, there's another reason why. This is a thing you get paid to do. It's a thing that makes your customers more secure. They should care about it because every security standard says you need to do this.
It's a baseline. It's not an official. I don't know if I may have used a word I shouldn't have used there, but it's something that you have to have on the ground floor if you're going to be able. It's foundational.
Yes, it's foundational. You can't protect what you don't know about. You can't protect what you don't know you have. You can't protect against threats if you don't know they're there. And software can be threats. So you have to do this. You should be making money doing this. It is a people process. You can use RMM tools, which take software inventories. You can use vulnerability management tools, which also take software inventories. They make dedicated tooling to do this. PCmatic and ThreatLocker are popular tools for this. But I will tell you that my favorite thing is just to do it. I don't care what tool. If you're looking at what tool and you're not sure what to spend money on to do this thing, you're looking at it wrong. This is a people process. You can use a spreadsheet. You don't even need to inventory every tiny package on the system. Just make a list of the things the business needs, and make a list of the things that aren't supposed to be there, and do something about it. Right. So that's the service, and ideally you're doing this continuously and periodically. Let's jump over to the topic. I've got some art here. I'm gonna click. Look at that. We can bring up there it is. There's the ChannelCon logo, CompTIA Trustmark. So the ChannelCon event, which is an annual event, although it didn't happen during COVID, there was an event last year. And they had it this year. It corresponds also with the CompTIA Partner Summit, same place, same time. The Partner Summit covers the educational side of the house. The ChannelCon covers the technical service provider side of the house. It's also CompTIA's annual meeting, and it's a chance for the whole community to get together and talk about all sorts of things that are affecting both communities. CompTIA is a trade association. They're the largest technology trade association in the world. And as Frank mentioned earlier, this is not a commercial event, right? This is a chance for competitors to get together with academics, with clients, and discuss things that matter to the industry. But there was one interesting launch for CompTIA this year. They had a couple powerful changes in their organization. One was an acquisition on the educational side, which I'm not going to talk about here today, but for our service providers, the big launch this year was the latest iteration of the CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark, which is intended to provide a baseline of credibility for service providers, so that as service providers relate to end customers and the larger economy, there's a stamp of quality or a stamp of credibility that customers can look at and say, I can see that I can trust this MSP because they have this certification. And there's a lot of certifications out there. This is the first one specifically created for technology service providers, managed technology service providers. There may be follow-ons, but I think CompTIA is a great home for this. And I'm really excited to be part of the program and see the first cohort going through this. And as a reminder, we've harped on it in almost every time we get on air here, but our industry has to self-regulate. Have to self-regulate, like the accountants out there, like the attorneys out there. And if we don't do it, the government's going to come regulate us. So this is an attempt to do that. It will take some years to scale this program. But there's we've already got a really exciting group of people. There's hundreds of people that have signed up to be to bring their companies through this process right now, and we're just getting started.
Actually, there's quite the wait list if I understand.
There is a wait list, and I'll some insider baseball here, Frank. Just putting you on the screen because you're nodding. I want to see your response. So we have hundreds of people on the wait list, right? But we're accelerating here every week, and I anticipate that it's not going to be years. It's going to be months. There's not going to be a wait list anymore. We're going to be, or at least the wait period will become short because we're scaling the processes out to work with service providers and with many of these service providers, this is the first time they've ever gone through any kind of audit or assessment and collected evidence for that kind of thing. But we're moving them through it, and we're having success with that, and we're getting people towards certification, and the rate that we're bringing new service providers through is increasing every week. So I would expect that several hundred long MSP list will be consumed in the following months here. Does anyone have any questions about first of all, before this week, did anyone hear about the Trustmark before?
No. Well, no, that's actually my question. Like we've been trying to implement CIS for quite some time. We work through it, we grab a control, we work through it, we go through iterations. And it hasn't been an easy process. It should be. I mean, you look at it, it's a simple question, right? Establish and maintain, and you spend 3 weeks debating what does it mean and but what is the difference between me self-implementing CIS and this Trustmark?
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So the Trustmark has a different goal from CIS. If we look at the history of CIS, first of all, it came out of the alphabet agencies in the federal government. It was gifted to the community. It first lived at the SANS Institute, and SANS then passed it along to a dedicated organization, an NGO, CIS, Center for Internet Security, to maintain and grow. And it was originally 20 controls, but each of those controls has sub-controls. And what CIS has done over time is they've compressed that down to just 18 domains or 18 controls, and each of those have sub-controls. It's over 130 practices if you do all of them, and you can implement either a low baseline of security or a middle baseline of security or a high baseline of security. And the reason you'd want to follow one of these baselines is because from a technical perspective, they are very comprehensive across the board. It's by following these baselines, you can be secure at the level you want to be secure and not be worried about leaving a back door open, right? Do you want your castle walls to be a foot high, 5 feet high, 25 feet high, and not leave a side door open that you just don't understand, is the goal of the standard. Now, CIS is a technical security standard, and there may be some changes in the future, but the goal of CIS was not to solve every problem in cybersecurity, and in particular, that it was a design goal for every CIS control to have a technical implementation. That is, if you're someone that is running the technology in an organization, you have the ability to impact that control. But there are cybersecurity or information security things that a technologist actually is not the person that needs to do those things. as an example, in NIST and a number of other standards, you've got personnel controls, right? And I'm not just talking about training them on their technology job or training them on why not to click on a link. It could be just training them on why not to release insider information. We may have to do
what
background
insider
checks.
information even is, right? I mean,
Yeah, what is insider information? Background checks, right? Making sure that perhaps we're doing separation of duties. Perhaps we're doing other types of personnel controls that are really outside the ability for a technologist in a technology organization to impact. So that's CIS, and I recommend CIS to every service provider that comes on our platform. We're a compliance platform because that's what managed infrastructure technology providers do. They are outsourced, they're business process outsourcers that replace the need for either some or all of an IT function in an organization, right? So the controls that they should be delivering to their client organizations should be technical in nature. However, the design goal of the CompTIA Trustmark was a little bit different. Instead of just saying technically, do you have the right security features, right? What they're trying to evidence is this MSP actually secure? And I know that sounds like it's almost the same thing, but an MSP actually does have control over their own governance, right? Appointing CISOs, they can do background checks on their own people, right?
Yeah.
And so what CompTIA has done is they've taken a number of governance and policy requirements that CIS never covered because they were non-technical, and they've added those in. And they may not be fun for an IT provider, but for many customers, they need to know that their IT provider has those things. By adding those extra controls in that CompTIA has added in the Trustmark. And by the way, their Trustmark is based on CIS, right? It's almost all of CIS. And so if you're familiar with CIS or you're implementing CIS, you're already on your road to Trustmark, right? But then we need to make sure that your policy development practices are in place. Make sure your governance practices are in place, right? And then finally, CIS is not a certification, right? CIS is a technical guide on how to secure, but the CompTIA Trustmark is an actual certification. And what I mean by certification is someone certifies you. Someone grades your homework and says, yes, this person's doing an adequate job of this thing. Or in CompTIA's place, a giant list of things are all analyzed and graded. And unless you have good answers for all of them and you can evidence all of them, you do not get certified. And that means the end customer knows that you as the MSP don't just theoretically have these technical skills, right? But you're actually doing all the things.
Cool.
Zach.
Yeah, I would love to jump in here because you're touching on what is the most exciting thing for me in terms of the CompTIA Trustmark. And I mean, there are some other reasons why it's exciting to me, and the logo is probably the biggest one. But other than that, thinking about it agnostically and from the perspective of the community, CompTIA is giving MSPs a way to define themselves and their value in the cybersecurity space, which is really, really important because there's a lot of individuals out there or organizations that maybe don't have the knowledge that they need or wish they had to be able to provide the level of standard and the level of security necessary to actually be making a difference in securing their clients. So, I mean, we're starting to move into the space in the industry where there's enough recognition around needing to get it right that we're starting to get it right. And that makes me feel optimistic about the future. It makes me feel optimistic that threat actors aren't going to continue to lean on a lack of education, because we should never be having in the most technical industry in the world having education be the thing that is our downfall. It's just silly. So I appreciate your points on that, Matt, and I appreciate you giving me kind of an avenue to throw that out there because that's important from my perspective too.
So I want to go to questions in a minute, but before we do that and talk about the rest of ChannelCon, Frank, Mike, Sean, any thoughts about this new Trustmark initiative?
I'll start. I know, I think it's valuable. We've been sort of helping along the way and part of the ISAO and, kind of related educational pieces. So I think it's a great play. And I think, at a higher level, kind of right, the regulate, I hate to say the regulation, but certification / regulation / validation of people delivering and being qualified to deliver the services that are going to be needed, right? This is it's hugely important. So Trustmark is a great first step in that path, and that's going to keep evolving, right? Just like the industry and just like the threats are evolving. So I think it's if you're an MSP on the line and you haven't heard about it, definitely check in and check into it and see where you're at on the list and where you're not on the list, but on the path. Because some things you're already doing, some things you'll have to do, on top of it. So keep it going.
Appreciate that, Frank.
Yeah, Matt, I would my natural instinct, because I've been involved in a couple other technical standards, not in IT but in a previous life. They fell flat because there was a gap in the intrinsic value for the person going through it. In this case, the MSP. Like if the end clients don't value the Trustmark, what motivates an MSP to do it? And I know that's a loaded question, but there's 50,000 MSPs in North America. If it's going to be like a couple thousand that have the Trustmark, what's the impact going to be? Because it's not like 48,000 MSPs are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, and so I can partially answer that question. First of all, this is going to be a marathon or several marathons, not like a sprint to finish here. And it's probably going to be iterative, and there's probably going to need to be more than one standard in the industry.
For the many different segments of the industry. Sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
well, CompTIA's goal here was to set a gold standard that if an MSP met it, could be trusted to function as an MSP in any place in the private sector, or even supporting the public sector, right? So it would be suitable for critical infrastructure. It would be suitable for healthcare, right?
Right. You and I talked about how you like CMMC because there's a carrot associated with CMMC. If you get on the CMMC roadmap, you now have the intrinsic opportunity to do business with the government.
To win that business.
Yeah. Right. And so this is a chicken and egg problem, right? Like you can't force people to do a thing that no one's done yet, right? Mm-hmm. So to do something new, there have to be leaders. But this is in response to two things. One, the government saying, you need to do this like IT industry, or we're going to do it for you. And as the largest IT trade association, it makes sense for CompTIA to be part of the solution. But the second thing is end clients actually are asking for this, but they're not informed enough to know what they need to ask, right? They're asking about credibility. They're asking about cybersecurity. And sometimes it comes out in questions like, do you have a SOC 2? And they ask that question because it's the only cybersecurity certification they've ever heard of because they saw it on the wall in their accountant's office, right? Mm-hmm. But if a service provider has a credible certification, right, they can prepare the educational materials to inform their customer. They can refer their customer to the industry sources. You can work with customers to alleviate that using this. But there is one other big driver here and one big push and advantage to this over other certifications, and that is if you are a CompTIA member, CompTIA is using member dollars to subsidize the cost of a rigorous certification process that if you went straight out to the open market, you would have to pay more for. And when we look at the competing standards that have a similar level of rigor, they are much more expensive processes to go through because you're paying your own way 100% of the way through. And CompTIA is a nonprofit, and they've got member dollars to spend, and they've got an interest in making this work, right?
I'd like to add just one piece to that, Matt. At the end, they already have they already have some agency and some clout, for lack of a better word, around the certification process. So, if there are 50,000 MSPs and 2,000 are certified, you're making a good point. And Matt's point to this is a couple of marathons is a really good point as well. But CompTIA doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? They are the experts in certifying around the cybersecurity space for people, right? So they're starting to transfer that skill that they already have, that niche that they already exist in, and expand it into what is very clearly a space for them where they're needed. So I just want to kind of tack that on to the backside of what Matt said. And also, Mike, I love the question. And I'm sure many of our viewers were thinking potentially the same thing. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to rain on anyone's parade. I'm asking because we're having open dialogue. Like, because we tried something similar, and I say tried in the past tense a little bit. I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but I can see the writing on the wall. We tried to do something in Canada. Sean may know about this. It's called Cyber Secure, one word. Mm-hmm. In 2020, the Canadian government started something. It wasn't for MSPs. It was broad spectrum, 13 controls, also very basic. It was a low bar to jump over.
Yep.
But there was no incentive. Like, it cost $5,000-$10,000 to get. There was no incentive. Mm-hmm. It didn't win you any business. It didn't help you. It didn't materially help you get cyber insurance. It might implicitly, but there wasn't any direct correlation. And it just died because no one was motivated to do it.
And I don't want to speak for cyber insurers. I'm not authorized to do that, but we do have some feedback that the insurance community is very interested in this type of rigor in terms of insurability.
That I could see being the carrot to move it along. And yeah, like, that's hot on my mind because I've heard from our clients. We were talking to DataStream at ChannelCon. Insuring MSPs is a very tricky business. And this may be the motivator for an MSP to get on board, is that it helps them get their own cyber insurance.
All right. Before we get to the community questions and the other show experiences, I've got some vegetables to feed the audience. So. Welcome to the show, Brian. You didn't.
Hey, thanks. I wore a different shirt this week, so I didn't match my headshot. Great to have you guys. I've been lurking in the shadows of the green room, following along this conversation. And Mike, great to meet you. I love a lot of the stuff you're talking about. Like, okay, but why would we do it? And if there isn't a great reason to do it, not enough people will do it. We won't really amass enough. Like, what makes a standard work is that everybody considers it's a standard, right? That's the definition of it. Like, in the early stages, it's so fragile. But I actually I'm sitting here. I always am thinking through the angle of the customer-centric, of the customer, the MSP customer, because that's where I live. Is I'm the edge between the MSP and the MSP's customer. And I actually think we have a fantastic opportunity for a carrot, the greatest carrot of all time, with a standard like Trustmark, which is new customers. So in a world where our industry, coming from, I've done consulting in the like global risk and compliance, ethics and compliance space, and ethics and compliance is just a much more mature sector in enterprise business than like cyber is just so much younger. And so a lot more, you have these chief compliance officers who are like very well versed in the DOJ guidance for, if I don't do these things, I might accidentally be having slaves legally, right? Like, there's modern slavery. There's all this law about it. There's all this corruption law. If I give somebody a gift worth $26 and their uncle knows somebody who works for the government, I technically just bribed Saudi Arabia. Okay.
I got busted on that once. I gave someone a $25 gift card.
Boom.
It was so awkward.
Did you drive to Target and buy it and send them the codes over the phone?
Oh yeah, they sent me a message saying they were in a meeting, they couldn't get to Amazon, so they needed me to send them a gift card. No, that's a separate joke. That's a separate joke.
I've never seen that happen.
And that's how you got into cybersecurity. That was your Batman's parents dying moment. You're like, never again.
Origin story.
But so anyway, I brought up the ethics and compliance space because like there's so much more control there because this is more mature, and also because you will pay millions of dollars if you do it wrong, right? And that is an example of a more regulated sector. And I think what we're all talking about, I don't want to throw a dog in, I don't want to poke a bee's nest about regulation in our industry, but I think our industry is sort of destined to regulate itself because we've seen so many breaches from MSPs. Like, well, my RMM agent got the threat actor access to all of your devices. Oops. So we're seeing an increased awareness of buyers who recognize MSPs as potential cybersecurity threats. But here's what I'm thinking about. All that aside, I talk to MSPs, I talk to dozens of MSPs a month who are trying to grow, and they all say the same thing. We're looking for differentiators. All of them are begging me to help them differentiate from the increasingly commoditized channel. What better chance do you have? I mean, think about it. Right now, the only way we can sort of regulate our cybersecurity is by like fuddy finger pointing to be like, well, all the other MSPs are garbage, but I'm great. And to the client's mind, that's as good as they're going to get.
There was a little bit of that tone when we were talking about it in the workshops, which I don't know how proactive that is for the conversation. Like to say, we need this regulation because there's a ton of MSPs that are bringing shame to the industry. That's not constructive to say.
No, not at all.
There's tens of thousands of people, and for the next couple of years, it's going to be single-digit % that are getting this trust mark.
That's my point. Is that right now that narrative is what's being perpetuated. But what if instead of using fuddy finger pointing, we could say, hey, a client says to me, hey, we've talked to 15 MSPs. Your bid is the most expensive. Why would we work with you? And we could say, I'm not really going to speak to the quality of the other MSPs. Here's what I can tell you. The largest, like the gold standard, CompTIA is when I joined my MSP and I was like, hey, by the way, what's VoIP mean? And what is virtual servers? They were like, go take these CompTIA certifications. Like that's where everybody goes. Everybody knows what CompTIA is. But now we can say CompTIA, the largest sort of, one of the largest vendors in our space, has developed a standard for managed services to elect to hold themselves accountable. We were an early adopter.
I love how you said that, to hold themselves accountable.
Right. So nobody made us do this. We did this because we're putting our money where our mouth is. So, Mr. Customer, would you do me a favor? Send this text message to the other 4 bids. Say, do you have CompTIA Trustmark? Yes or no? And don't let them explain. Just say yes or no, because they've had opportunity to do that for the last year or 6 months or whatever. And if they all say no, then the only thing I can tell you about what's different about me is that we self-elected to be regulated by the most vigorous standard we could find, that we can't fill in all the answers ourselves. And your other options didn't. What do you think, Mr. Customer, that has to say about how we feel about your cybersecurity?
A watershed moment in that conversation would be if CompTIA put out like the Super Bowl ad to get this into the mainstream consciousness, because that's where the carrot lies. Is the regular small business owner knows it enough to ask for it, or appreciates when the MSP says, we have this trust mark. And so the dental clinic owner says, oh, yeah, I saw that in the Super Bowl commercial. I'm going to go ask the other bidders if they have that as well.
But I agree. But to play devil's advocate, I think I'm going to hark back to something Matt said.
Hey, Brian, I hate to cut you off, but I think that we would be remiss if we didn't use our last 11 minutes kind of giving people a view of what they missed at ChannelCon.
Oh, sure.
I love the points that you guys are making, but I know that we've got some viewers that want to hear, about everybody's most important piece.
We have one comment here that, we've got some Trustmarky comments, but here's the short one. Here's an MSP that says it's working. He got some traction and buy-in, and I don't see a name there because we got some privacy rules, but on LinkedIn. But I mean, that's great to see that the process is working and people want to do it, right? And they think there's value there.
So let's spend the last 10 minutes giving our MSP friends who didn't get to experience ChannelCon what we felt like the most important moment was, or our biggest takeaways. Brian, I know that you weren't there, but you gave some really, really amazing perspective, and I really appreciate it. Sean, what was the most, you bring the MSP perspective, right? You were one of our MSP CompTIA members. So
Yeah,
what you thought was most important?
It's interesting because we're talking security. That's what this is all about. But for me, the most important sessions I took part in were about mental health and the stresses that cyber professionals are under and other IT professionals in terms of trying to deliver security. I often say my job is to keep my clients out of the news. That never was my job, but that's my job now, is keeping them out of the news, and that's a stressful thing. So I was really happy to see people talking about that and how we can potentially help people get through it.
I appreciate that, Sean. Awesome. Mike or Frank?
Mike, I've been stepping in. You go first.
Okay. Well, my main takeaway is very similar to what Brian was talking about. Is I found the event very positive. There were some sessions where we're talking a little bit doom and gloom, but my main takeaway was that there's a huge opportunity, huge latent opportunity for a lot of the MSPs in the community to jump on this cyber thing, not only as duty of care to their clients, that I think we've established, but as a differentiator, as a business opportunity. I took a picture that I posted on LinkedIn. The session with the most amount of people taking photos of the slides was the pricing cybersecurity one. The room was packed. Every slide that Natalie posted, everyone had their phones out taking pictures. So you can see, like, that's the information that people are dying to find out. I'm pretty sure every MSP has been beaten over the head to say, like, cybersecurity is important. Okay, that's been established. Now they're itching for the information. Like, how do I get that in my stack? How do I communicate it to my clients so that I can take advantage of the business opportunity and deliver value and make money?
Love it.
And that was the big positive takeaway. Like, you combine that with Scott Augenbaum's comment that 90% of the cybercrime that he investigated is easily preventable, and that's the nexus we're at. Like, most of the exploits, most of the incidents, let's say, with small businesses are like real low-hanging fruit stuff, real low-hanging fruit. And that's the perfect opportunity for these MSPs. It's not a huge mountain that you have to climb to make a meaningful impact for your clients. If you can take the training information from CompTIA, work the messaging into your communication with your clients, you can make a meaningful impact. Like, they'll love you as much as they love Sean because you're helping them stay out of the news. Which I enunciate better because I thought you said noose.
I thought he did too. And in my head just now, I was like, either one, baby. Don't be.
Both work. Let's say news. That's a little bit more.
Thank you for enunciating.
Right. Like, the opportunity is there, and this is why I like the CIS Control you proposed, Matt, because it's not a super fancy tech jargony AI powered thing that you need. Like, we're talking about boring discipline. Checklists, going through the inventory, talking with your clients more than once every 6 months. Like, this is just boring discipline that gets you from 1 out of 10 in cyber maturity to like 2, 3, 4. And that's what small businesses need.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great point. And one of the things that I guess that was consistent at this event that it still surprises me amongst an audience that's with as much security news and much tools and everything else that's going on in the MSP world, is that there's still so much lack of, I'm sorry, I don't mean lack, but just sort of a shortage of what to do next, right? I know I'm here, I need to go there. What's my first step down this path? And, I think between Mike and, my product, right, it's basic cyber hygiene, sort of, you can't protect what you don't know about. So get knowing what you have. Either as an existing tool with your existing customers or as a prospecting tool, right? You got to go there. And I think, one of my colleagues, Matthew Koenig, he does a lot of this training and presentations on just, how to sell cyber, right? And it's still just so surprising on how many people come to this that are, I thought we've been involved in it for years and years, and there's always something new to learn about. The other thing two other things real quickly. The keynote was one of the better keynotes I've ever heard. This Mike Ebelman. I'm going to start reading his book this weekend. I mean, it was just sort of how to, get over the impossible and just different mindset and just, again, a bit of that is the first steps and all that. But that was a very
4 times. I was so angry with him because he just kept making me cry. That's how we feel human.
I was
you know what I mean? Like trying to wipe, like, no, not me.
No, I'm glad I wasn't the only one. I wasn't looking around for other eyes because I knew they would have seen mine.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say that I had a panel. We were talking about kind of after the sale, right? Sort of what you need to do. The easy part is getting the contract done. The really hard part is delivering on it and customer satisfaction. And Sean, you probably live with this every day, right? Just sort of, how do you deploy? How do you, go the 3x3, right? Up and down and sideways. If you don't just work with the person that signed your contract. You got to work with, 3 levels down at the front office desk or the admin or the secretary or whoever, right? And just make yourself known, be providing more than they expect. And that's really, I think, a hard thing to do, whether it's, the basic cyber services and what they're already expecting a lot, right? So if you're not communicating, if you're not building that up, then you're just cutting yourself short and you're going to lose your business. So,
as the third party nail on that point, Frank, the last cybersecurity workshop that we had, the sort of ask me anything with the panel, someone asked, and I'm so glad they did. We're all hyped up now. What do you want us to do tomorrow? What's the parting message? And Matt Lee from PAX 8 said, MFA, go make sure your client's using MFA, which is like hitting the nail on the head. The solution to small business cybersecurity is not some magical magnet in the sky. It's just basics. The basics that all of us and every MSP are aware of. Implementing the boring basics is what's going to raise the level.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll give my favorite part, and then I'll dish it off to Matt for the old alley-oop finish off. My favorite, I guess, I don't know if it was a workshop or a panel, but there was a discussion around distribution platforms, and Dennis from Ingram Micro talked about some things that they're doing to leverage AI to more effectively communicate the tools that are going to work for the MSP. And I thought, this doesn't really have anything to do with FortMesa or Trustmark or any of our guys on here, but I really was excited about that because, at the highest level, they're still thinking about, okay, how can I get the right tool to the right MSP? And the fact that the industry is concerned about that and investing in high level engagement, that's important. He also finished off that conversation by saying, we have this AI doing this, and we're using people tracking the data to make sure that it's actually, being used properly. So that ticked a box for me as a man after my own heart. And that was my favorite part. So Matt, go ahead and.
I wish so that point of the pricing discussion being really popular. I wish we could spend like another hour on that right now. But
I'm free.
I really enjoyed.
I can share them.
I really enjoyed talking to the actual Trustmark participants. With our direct customers who are working through compliance, and they're doing this internally, and they're bringing this out to their customers. We get all sorts of stories. Some of them are fun and some of them are horrible, right? But it was really great hearing those experiences of people going through this Trustmark process, and it was encouraging. People are making traction. They're getting through it. They feel like they see the end of the process. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. They see the value now that they're like midway, right? They're like, oh yeah, we put in place these things. There were these other things that we weren't doing that now we're going to do, right? And that's what the process is supposed to do. So that was.
I think to that point, right? I think the sort of the general gist, right, or the general momentum is around, again, whether it's certification, regulation, but that these things are coming, and that, everybody needs to be involved. And if they're, it's just it's just coming, and it's got to be done right. And I think CompTIA is kind of leading that way, because there could be 10 different ways to do it, and 10 different entities that have some commercial level behind them, right? Or some bias that's going to direct to something. But so anyway, I'm excited about what they can do, and what we can, us as a community can support it and communicate it, right? Get it out there. The earlier point about, if nobody's being driven to it, nobody's going to promote it. So, and then it's a bad chicken and the egg scenario, or catch-22, I guess. But
all right, well, we'll have to bring some pieces of this group back together in the future for some of these subjects. But
yeah,
Brian,
great chats.
I feel like we didn't cover the pricing angle, but insert plug here, Brian.
Okay. I love helping people communicate value of their products. The whole reason I come onto this show is that I want to bridge people between all of this super incredibly important material that your clients will never give a shit about. But we absolutely have to care about this. They will never care about this. So how do we explain to them, no, if you're only paying $130 a seat, you're not getting full cyber, and I can literally prove it to you, because the required tools just to be up to regulatory standards cost more than that. So anyway, I think I would love to be a resource for anybody who's struggling to communicate value of their tool set, especially their high ticket sort of cyber tool set. Come to one of the workshops, feelgoodmsp.com. We run a 3-day workshop this month, and love to help you.
All right. You guys want to do your plugs?
I'll just say nodeware.com, nodeware.com. Check us out. Contact me. Matt, I suppose you'll put some contact info out here somewhere, anybody that's attending or following up with. So.
Yeah. Your identity and company gets linked. Mike?
Matt, Zach, thanks for having me. My name is Michael Bakaich from Iceberg Cyber. Come check us out, icebergcyber.com. We got a little applet so you can get a free cyber score for your client. It takes like 10 seconds. So if you want to jump on board with the cyber version of a credit score, come check it out. Find me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. I'd love to talk to your ear off about it.
And at FortMesa, we're helping MSPs and other types of IT providers own their clients' cybersecurity roadmap. We use compliance tools. There's sales tooling. There's service delivery tooling. I'd love to talk to you about it more. So you got a call, right? Sean, give us your client pitch here.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is a tough audience to pitch my services to, for sure. But in the end, like I said earlier, my job and my business's role is to keep our clients out of the news, and as long as we can do that, we're going to be successful, and we're going to save some people some heartache for sure.
I love that value prop.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was a hoot. I hope everybody enjoyed hearing about ChannelCon and CompTIA and these guys. And Matt, anything else for everybody? Love the pooch.
He's ready for the weekend. Let's start it.
That was the dog at the beginning, guys.
Oh, right. Awesome.
All right, I'm sending it out. Bye.
Bye, everybody.